Hello, YouTubes. Welcome back to James Recommends. Last week, we pulled an episode because a patch that happened a couple days before completely changed what the episode would be. And so I had lots of you, when we announced that on social media, I had lots of you guys going to our Facebook, our Twitter, being like, what is the game? We want to hear about this change. That sounds super exciting. All right, I'll talk about it. I think this is going to disappoint a lot of people because the game was Card King Dragon Wars. So yes, it was another super tiny tablet card game. What I found so fascinating about it was it actually turns out to be what I always wanted the Pokemon CCG to be, at least when brought into digital form. The short version, I'm going to try and keep this as quick as possible so I can talk about the changes. But the short version is you have a team of 5 essentially Pokemon creatures which you raise and grow and evolve, right? And you bring them into battle, and each turn you've got an increasing energy system a la Hearthstone. First turn you get 10, second turn you get 20, and so on, up to when it caps at 100. For 20 mana, or whatever you want to call it, you can bring one of these creatures into battle, and then you can do things with it. If you just have it attack, you get to draw a card. If you have it use a card, you don't get to draw a card. And that's the principle. What makes this really interesting is that unlike normal CCGs where you choose all the cards in your deck, in this, each of the creatures has a certain number of cards associated with it. So there'll be like 5 or 6 or 7 cards which any given creature can pull. So when you attack with your Pikachu, you can get various lightning effects, right? But what makes this doubly interesting is, and what really adds strategy and depth to this game, because that's sort of a system that you've seen in, what is that game called? Card Hunter? Card Hunter and Loot and Legends. Those are the 2 identical games with different names on different platforms. And yes, I know there are minor changes. But getting back to the game at hand, so what this is, each of your creatures represents a certain portion of your overall deck. So when I attack with one of my creatures, I get to draw one of the 7 cards associated with it. What makes it fascinating is, and what added a huge amount of strategic depth, what I thought was really good, is you can then use any of those cards you've drawn with any of your other creatures. So if you attack with your Pikachu and get some lightning attack, but some other creature has a better stat set to use that, or if you attack with a guardian creature and you pull a taunt, but your guardian creature is almost dead, you can actually use that taunt on one of your other creatures, and now it'll absorb all the attacks, right? For however long that taunt lasts. So this created a lot of dynamic gameplay, a lot of strategic depth from a relatively simple concept, and made deck building really interesting because now, rather than playing with one deck, it's almost like you're playing with 5 related decks, and you have to think about how decks interrelate rather than individual cards. Fascinating. I thought it was really innovative in a lot of ways, or at least took a lot of systems from a lot of other games, put them together in a really innovative way for a CCG. Okay, so that's the game. That's why I recommend it. That's why if you're into CCGs, you should check it out. But last week, they did a patch which I totally understand. I think they were probably not hitting their marks in terms of either monetization or user retention. And so they did something which was interesting to me as a designer, but took away a lot of this. What they really did is they pushed the attack numbers on a lot of the creatures, which had 2 effects. Effect number 1 is that it sped up play a great deal, right? Because they didn't really change the defense numbers that much. And so now games which used to take 10 to 15 minutes could easily be done in 5. I understand why you do that for a tablet platform, but the ancillary effect is that this whole game, which they had balanced for the earlier numbers, now was pretty imbalanced, and games would turn relatively rapidly before you could do a lot of the strategic development that involved having one deck interact with another deck, right? Also, when you up damage numbers and you don't up defense, critical hits can turn a whole game, and this is a game that has critical hit percentage. And I don't think they tweak the critical hits very much when they up their damage numbers. So that was one side of it. The other thing they did is they had a tiered system, like most of these sort of collectible games, where you had commons, uncommons, rares, ultra rares, mega ultra rares, legendary, whatever you want to call it. And in the rebalance, they increased the quality differential on the creatures of different rarities. This is clearly to push monetization, right? Because now ultra rares are vastly better than rares, much better than uncommons, etc. So now you need to be playing with a set of ultra rares. This was also a problem because one of the really interesting things about this is sometimes you choose an uncommon, which was slightly weaker in terms of raw stats because it had a more interesting set of cards in its particular deck to synergize with the rest of the creatures you were playing. But they basically blasted that out of the water by making their ultra rares so much more powerful that you would now never consider, even if the cards were better, bringing in a uncommon. And that to me took away a lot of this really interesting deck building synergy that they had developed that I hadn't seen before in having decks associated with creatures and yet the cards in those decks be playable on any creature. So that's the reason for last week's video's cancellation. That's Card King Dragon Wars. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you should check it out. I'm sorry you didn't get to see it pre-patch if you didn't get a chance to. But yeah, this week, James sort of recommends. James tells you why he didn't last week recommend Card King Dragon Wars. All right, see y'all next week.